Good afternoon, Austin. Hope everyone is having a good start to their Monday. Hopefully, everyone is staying relatively cool since we're going to have some crazy weather this week as well. Today, I am joined by Forrest, who is someone I connected with, found out through TikTok actually, and saw some really kind of cool, interesting things she was doing. And so, wanted to have her on the podcast and get a chance to kind of talk to her. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on and chat today.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. I'm happy to be here.
Nice. Well, so one of the first things that I noticed, so as a realtor and someone who's now lived in Texas for about 18 years, I know that a lot of places, a lot of times when I go hang out with people, I'm kind of a 10-year Texan having lived here for 18 years. But
Mhm.
you, in your profile and stuff, mentioned that you're a seventh generation Texan, which is pretty, as someone who also likes history, I find really cool that someone has that kind of history and lineage uh, in one place. So I mean, for you, it's just normal life. But
Mhm.
what do people say when they find out that you and your family have lived in Texas for that long?
My family came to Texas in 1854 from Poland. It's through my mom's side of the family, actually.
Mhm.
My dad came to Texas when he was in like middle school, so he's not
Yeah.
a native Texan either. But people find it interesting, especially now since I moved to Austin, where there's so many transplants.
Mhm.
If they find that out, they're like, "Whoa, like that's kind of crazy." But yeah, so my family has been in Bear County since the 1850s. Um, so that's where our connection comes in.
Very cool. Yeah. So for like those of us again who have been here for even a decade or so, we can see like, oh wow, look at all the changes. Your family, your mom, grandparents, and stuff are like, no, we can really see all the changes that have gone on over the last 20, 50 plus years that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in Austin, it's funny when talking to certain people, you can kind of tell how long they've been in Texas. Like, one thing that I think is like an easy gauge is if someone calls it Town Lake or Ladybird Lake, you kind of know if they came recently because they're like, oh, what's Town Lake? And I'm like, oh, that's just what people have called it before it was legally changed
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
Lady.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, even there, I say town, like, I feel like it's only been the last 6, 7 years that it's really been a super official, hey, we're really changing it that way. And so, yeah, like say those or people don't understand. The road system is also one of those things that really confuses somebody who's new because you have a strip of road like uh, or not interstate, but Highway 183, which at one point in time, is also considered Research Boulevard and Ed Bluestein and all these other kind of pieces of road that have been eventually joined together to form U.S. Highway 183. And so
Mm-hmm.
the fact that there's so many different things around Austin that kind of have multiple names and is kind of an interesting component to it as well.
Definitely. Also, how people pronounce roads like Manchac, like
Yeah.
that. That's always a hot topic here, too.
Or so like Elgin,
Hmm.
back in Minnesota, where I went to high school and college, we have similar town, same name, but it's called Elgin. Like
Oh,
the
okay.
G is pronounced differently, and so they say there's definitely a lot of different local colloquialisms that you can kind of uh, will distinguish how long people have been somewhere and different things that way.
Yeah.
So one of the way that I originally connected with you, like you say, or found out about you was through some of your TikToks where you like to talk about Texas history. What have Obviously I'm assuming history and Texas history has been something that's always been kind of appealing to you. Kind of maybe what's some of the origin around when that first became a topic that you were interested in.
Yeah, so it's definitely been something that I've been interested in my whole life. I think partially maybe because my family's been here for so long. Um, so I have that family history, but also I just had really awesome teachers in my school from, I think the first time we take Texas history is sixth grade in Texas public schools. Um, and it was always just so interesting to me. And I studied art history in college. Actually, I was a double major in art history and communications at Syracuse, though. So I left Texas for college. I went far up to upstate New York, but history's always been of interest to me. And then I guess I started making TikToks maybe like not a whole year ago, but I think the history videos kind of took off maybe like 6 months ago, where they started getting views and tractions. And I think I had just done something like off wind, like randomly, like a video of like some interesting historical fact that I knew, and it took off. So I was like, oh, I'll stick with this because people like it and I like making these videos. So that's how I kind of started doing that.
Nice. Yeah, no, it definitely helps in any kind of content creation. If you enjoy the topic that you're talking about, it makes it a lot easier to want to do videos about that. Going up to Syracuse then was kind of was there a certain period in history or location in history that was kind of your focus that way? Because I'd imagine you'd get a lot of different history topics from a university in upstate New York than you might from a high school or university in Texas.
Yeah. Well, so at Syracuse, it was all art history. And because it was undergrad, it was kind of like a more broad range of things. But I think actually going to college out of state was a really great decision, kind of like broadened my horizons and I don't know, made me more well-rounded. The neighborhood I grew up in, San Antonio, was referred to as the bubble because it was kind of insular and like everyone stayed in that area and like I don't know, we wouldn't leave. So it was good to be out of Texas for a few years.
No, I feel like there's a lot of neighborhoods that are kind of like that in even in Austin too, kind of one with how the city's made. Like it's kind of like you have all of your things you can want to do really within a certain bubble. And or even more so on the East Coast. I think that's one of the cool things about Austin is so many people have moved here from other places, even if it's just San Antonio, but California, Michigan, all these things where they're used to having been here new at some point in time and just have that personality trait where they kind of enjoy meeting new people. And not that there's anything bad, not that people from the Northeast or other parts of the country don't, but because I think there's more long-term generation families like yourself in places like New York that you just get used to what you do, right? We get in our routines. It's not that people don't enjoy meeting new people, but when your routine is to go to work and hang out with the friends you've hung out with for the last 20, 30 years, sometimes it's hard for new people to crack that friend group through no fault of their own that way. But again, in Austin, because so many people have been here for varying amounts of time, it seems to me that it's a little bit easier to get integrated and initiated into a lot of different groups of people.
I absolutely agree. I think if you're a person looking to like move somewhere new and you want to go to a place where it's easy to plug in and make new friends, Austin is definitely a great city to do that. I happen to live in downtown in a high rise, and there's not a lot of people from Texas in my building. But anyway, you just see like how quickly people move here and instantly like find this big group of friends because everyone is new here and everyone's, meeting new people and they don't know anyone here, so they stick together.
Again, which is not that I haven't lived in New York, but I've spent enough time like in New York City where again, you don't talk to anybody really when you're there, right? And so it's just kind of a completely different vibe in that regard. Is like you would ride an elevator up with someone in an apartment or in a condo there and almost never say anything to them. Whereas in Texas, like the immediately, like, oh, what floor are you on, or what, where, how long have you been here in the building? Those kind of things just seem like they're.
You're so right again. So after Syracuse, I moved to Manhattan for 2 years. So I moved back to Texas last May. But I think if I hadn't gone to Syracuse, I don't know if I would have made that many friends in New York, because as you were saying, like people don't really like talk to each other, branch out. Like you would only know like the people you work with and maybe your roommates. But anyway, since I went to Syracuse, so many of my college friends moved to New York afterwards. So you definitely probably have to be a lot more extroverted and try hard, like to make friends in New York than Austin.
Even roommates sometimes in New York are kind of like, oh, we just all do our own thing. I actually remember one time too being on the subway in New York and seeing a lady with a Longhorn, whether she was younger, so I don't know if she had gone to the University of Texas or just was from here or whatever. And I'm like, well, normally in a place where that's not that common, I would go say hi, but like she's on the subway with her earbuds in, like I don't want her pepper spray me just because I went and said hi to her and said, or something like that. So again, it's both cities have a lot of cool things about them, but it should definitely a different personality vibe between those two for sure.
Yeah, and that is one thing I do love about Texas is how friendly everyone is, and how I think even people who are moving here from elsewhere, they quickly adapt to like having that friendly attitude, and like, you know, they'll start waving to people when they're walking on the street and stuff like that. So that's always nice.
They have to, otherwise we're not gonna, ingratiate them into our groups and stuff. So yeah. It's pretty awesome. So what kind of, so you liked history, obviously you studied it that way. Do you use history or your art history major in your professional life as well too?
So when I lived in Manhattan and actually like all my internships during college, I worked at blue chip art galleries in New York. So that's like a pretty high end level of art where since you're in real estate, like a lot of the art costs just as much as houses. So it's kind of like it's a really interesting world. And so you use that knowledge when you're discussing the artists and stuff. But when I moved back to Texas, I started working in the real estate industry. So I actually work for a home builder.
Okay.
And yeah, a lot of my family is in the real estate business here in Texas. I got a lot of appraisers in my family, so you might have mixed feelings about them as a realtor, but yeah.
That's one of those where in most cases they just have their it's kind of like loan officers and stuff too. I was actually a loan officer, so like there's definitely instances where people will butt heads, but in a lot of cases they're doing their parameters off of how the guidelines are supposed to be done. It's not like they're making up things out of thin air just to try to make things difficult ever. So it's the last year or two has been a crazy time, especially for appraisers because of all the refinances and stuff. Like trying to get an appraiser to do anything was super challenging that way. But again, it's just the nature of what they're supposed to do. So no, definitely not. Definitely very rarely any hard feelings towards appraisers. So
okay, good.
So then what prompted you to decide to make the TikTok video then in regards to history?
Yeah, I think it was probably, I can't remember like the first video that did well, but I just started making videos. Like one I remember doing early on, I did the history of Clarksville. So like that neighborhood in Austin, which I feel like no one really knows the history about that neighborhood. It was a historic Black neighborhood. It was they lost a third of the neighborhood when Mopac Expressway was built, and the residents who got pushed out weren't paid fairly. So I did a video about that. Some people were commenting on it, and I was like, okay, I'll keep doing it. And, Texas has so much history, and there's so many things that even just the street names, like Lamar, that's named after the second president of Texas. There's so many things here. It's easy to find things to make videos about. Right. A lot of people actually ask me where I get ideas. And so a lot of my ideas come from Texas State Historical Association. So their website is tshaonline.org. And they've got a cool page on their website that's Texas Day by Day. So they'll tell you like 100 years ago today, this happened.
Okay, yep.
So if it's something that interests you, I think that's a fun like website to use and go off of. But yeah, I don't know.
Nice. Yeah, no, I remember one of the probably most profound like single statements that I remember from college was in my history class when they talked about one of the like your basic history class you had to take. Talk about like history is written by the winners, right? And so there's nowadays it kind of feels like we know all this history because there is a lot of things that we know, but in today's world, because you have all of these opposing point of views, and obviously right now in the last couple of years not that it's been a bad thing, but it's led to a lot of conflict and stuff with people. But in general, having that knowledge base is awesome compared to 100 years ago, 500 years ago, when in reality at that point the people that won the battle or won the argument are generally the only people that really got to write or the only people that got to frame the story. And nowadays it's easier to find information that shows both sides of a historical event or the unfortunately some of the poor things that have happened in history that a lot of times get whitewashed because
definitely. I think with everything being put online, it's really easy to get all kinds of different perspectives on it. I do think there's still like a lack in some areas, especially with Native Americans, because they weren't keeping diaries like white settlers were, like writing every single day what's happening. A lot of their history is oral history, so that's not something that I have access to since I'm not a part of that culture. But I think as time goes on, like we always are learning new things, which is great.
Yeah, no, it's like I say, the way we record history has definitely changed a lot over the years too. And so now with the advent of video and online stuff, like there's a plethora of options for recent.
There's probably too much stuff.
For sure things. Do you generally tend to, with most of your videos and stuff, tend to stay within, say, Austin, Central Texas, all of Texas, or even branch out beyond that?
I try to stay in Texas. I think I do tend to kind of stay within areas I'm familiar with. So like the hill country, San Antonio. I've done some recent stuff like in South Texas towns. The only time I've really branched out is I did some stuff about Kentucky, which that's where my dad's side of the family is from. It's usually rooted in a place that I'm somewhat familiar with.
You at least have a connection to, right? Because then it makes the history more meaningful for you that way. So
but I also been I look at the comments now, and some people suggest things, and I look it up, and I learn a lot actually by reading that stuff. And there's some interesting snippets in there, so I make videos about what people are commenting about too.
Nice. Yeah. No, like say for me as someone who grew up originally in Michigan, like like state borders and a lot of those types of things are interesting. It's like Michigan, Ohio had a border war. Which is, again, stuff you wouldn't necessarily think of, but Ohio won that and got the land. And because of that, Michigan got the Upper Peninsula, like got this whole huge swath of land, which actually ended up probably being a better win than had won that. Right. But there's just all these kind of interesting things there. Have you done much, obviously probably one of the most well-known things in Texas history is kind of the changing hands of like who's owned it, obviously the independence, the United States, Mexico, Spain, all these kind of things. Have you done much about that topic at all, or is that
I've done a lot about the Texas Revolution. Obviously being in San Antonio, that's where the Alamo is, so that's just a big part of growing up in San Antonio. Like we always go during like special events like Fiesta in San Antonio, which I don't know if you've been. It's like this 2-week festival in April. Everyone goes and takes photos in front of the Alamo. It's like, it's the Alamo City. So anyway, I've done a lot about the Texas Revolution. And actually yesterday on May 15th, I did a video about Laredo because it was founded some odd years ago, like I think like I don't know, in like 1719 or something. But Laredo is interesting because they actually formed their own republic in 1840, which a lot of people don't know about. It's the Republic of the Rio Grande. And so like Six Flags amusement parks are called Six Flags because there's been 6 nations that have ruled over Texas. But if you ask someone from Laredo, they would say there's 7 flags because they had a republic for a year or less than a year. But yeah.
Interesting. That is, like I say, there's always something that you're not going to know. Like it's a cool, history is a cool topic to me because there's always something that you're not going to be aware of that you can find out about.
Yeah, definitely.
So with that one specifically, like what prompted them to have their own republic, and then how did they just get obviously absorbed?
Yeah, I didn't delve too much into it, but from my understanding is Laredo was actually ruled by Mexico at that point, and they were opposed to Santa Anna because he had a very unitary government at that point. And so they formed their own republic, and then eventually by Mexican force were brought back under control of Mexico. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have what's like maybe the most in the last year-ish or so that you've been doing these, what is there besides that one potentially like the most interesting story that you found out about or got a chance to learn and study about?
Yeah, so I recently did a video that I didn't think would do that well, and I got I think it has like 300,000 views now. So sometimes TikTok surprises me on which videos do well because I didn't really spend that much time on making it, but it was about this Italian mob family that controlled Galveston for 20 some odd years. Back like starting in the Prohibition era, but they're actually the great uncles of the Houston Rockets owner, who's this Texas billionaire. His last name is Tillman, and he owns Landry's, like the seafood chain. So it's just that one I found was interesting because there's obviously a connection to now the Rockets owner, his family had kind of like mob origins, but yeah.
Yeah, not that he's necessarily mobbed up, but that doesn't mean that again there's the Kennedys have connections to Prohibition, right? Like with that too. And so like there's a lot, just because not that necessarily makes them bad people, especially now that they're not doing illegal things, but that doesn't mean that there aren't interesting tidbits in family histories as far as what was going on.
Definitely.
Has there been something that you have found out that maybe changed compared to what you had learned in grade school and high school as far as Texas history goes?
I don't know if anything's changed. I definitely just know a lot more now because I feel like in school it was just a much more general understanding of things. And so I've gotten way more detailed with it. I get a lot of Texas history books that I like to read up on. So I think my knowledge has just increased, not necessarily changed. But yeah, there's some good books. One, if you're looking to get into it, for any of the listeners, there's a book called Big Wonderful Thing. It's by Stephen Harrigan. I think it was actually published through UT's in-house publishing thing that they do at the university. But it's a overview of Texas history. And so the name Big Wonderful Thing comes from a quote from someone, I can't remember who, but they call Texas this big wonderful thing. So I think that's a nice little title.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think as far like my Texas history claim to fame is I've gotten to meet and spend some time with H.W. Brands, who is a history professor at UT,
Uh-huh.
I think well known because he's been on like the History Channel and done some things that way. I mean, obviously he's done a lot of additional things more than that, but he's probably one of the I would guess, most well known historians here in Texas from that
Yeah,
source.
definitely. I have some of his books. I'm trying to remember which one. I think he did the really famous Empire of the Summer Moon book, which was about Quanah Parker, who was like the last Comanche war chief. So that was a good book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Has delving into all of this, like kind of getting back into it, obviously, because it's not like you were necessarily dealing with this even in college and stuff. Has it, what's been the best part about it for you?
I mean, I think it's always great to learn about like the place you're living, and for me, the place I'm from. But it's also cool with this TikTok stuff. I've gotten to, kind of like meet people. Like I met you through social media. I've gotten to work with some like local Austin companies doing some videos for them, which is cool. I recently went out to Treaty Oak Distilling, which is in Dripping Springs, and made a video for them. And they've kind of got a little history to them because the Treaty Oak is like a historic tree in downtown Austin, and the city actually gave them a sapling from that tree. And so it's on their property in Dripping Springs, which is cool. But yeah, so I just like being, connected in the city.
Yeah, that's so cool. What are for people that want to follow you and kind of get your, obviously the nice part with TikTok is you can get a lot of quick bits about Texas history.
Uh-huh.
For those of us who have short attention spans and can't dive too deep into it. But what are kind of the best ways to follow you to find out more on different topics for that?
Yeah, so my TikTok is Forrest from Texas, and I spell Forrest with 2 R's. It's the same on Instagram, but I'm not really active on Instagram. So I don't really post any history stuff there. But yeah, TikTok is the best way. And yeah, a lot of TikTok has a time limit. So I'm kind of forced to be creative with the stories and get them down to, under a minute or 2 minutes, which is good for keeping the attention span. Yeah.
Now I think you can go longer. I don't know if it's like 3 minutes or 10 minutes, but yeah, that
TikTok
I haven't seen anybody go that long and have a video perform well though. Like I don't think people.
Yeah, I've never seen a 10-minute video on there. TikTok notified me that I could do a 10-minute video, but I'm not going to because that's way too long for me. But I don't even have the option on the app, so I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it was awesome getting a chance to chat. Like I say, I think the topics are really cool to hear things that, again, I would imagine most of us who didn't go to grade school and high school here in Texas find it to be new information. And I think, again, obviously there's a lot of people who enjoy history, and there's just so much of it. So it's awesome that you get to share that passion of yours and educate people as well.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful day.